Oh, whoa, yikes. You doing alright over there, Lord Devereaux?
Of course. I've simply overindulged. You told me this challenge of yours would result in a steady stream of sustenance. Instead, I've been gifted a feast of mythic proportions. I'm going to gain significant mass by the time this month is finished.
Honestly, I don't think that's a problem. You're too damn skinny as it is.
Ugh. Your choice of phrase reminds me of my mother.
Oh, hey guys, what's up?
We're hungry! I don't know how that's possible. This castle is filled with stories. We don't eat those stories.
Have you checked the fridge, guys?
Yeah, all we found in there were some poems from this week. Oh, yes. Poetry sounds wonderful.
Are you sure you want to eat more right this second? Honestly, maybe you've had enough.
I shall inform you when I've reached my limit. Oh, Mr. Devereaux, sir, did you want ketchup? Come again? Did you want ketchup with your poems? Why would I ever combine those two things? Lots of people eat those poems with ketchup.
I don't know if that's true.
It's not true. That's just a lie the hobbitses told you.
Okay, guys. If you grab Lord Devereaux some poems from the fridge, I'll order you some food. How's that sound?
Fishies?
Yes, fishies.
Yay! All this fast food isn't good as this for us. Oh, grab me M. Ann Avera's poetry collection, Complete and Total Honesty. Oh, I'm very excited to sample that one. Wait a moment. I smell creativity. You, Bradley, what are you doing over there?
You caught me. I'm working on the podcast. Hey, you know M. Ann Avera is the guest this week, so it's good you're checking out some of her poems.
Ah, yes, the podcast. It smells delicious. What is it called again?
Oh, it's called the Saved as Draft Podcast.
That has to be the most preposterous name I've ever heard. What does it even mean?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 38 of the Saved as Draft podcast. You know, I could have explained the name of the show to Lord Devereaux, but you know how it goes. Once the podcast name gets said in the intro, it's time to wrap things up. I don't make the rules. Except I do, and that's one of them. We have to respect tradition around here. And speaking of traditions, we are in week 2 of the first Indulgence challenge. Paranormal horror has been bringing out the best in all of you. I'm absolutely loving the sheer creativity and talent on display with all these submissions. Oh, and speaking of submissions, we crossed over 100 stories a while back this week. Can you believe that? This is easily the most successful challenge that I've hosted. And part of me thinks it's because Lord Devereaux's with us this time. I mean, with art like the one I commissioned from the Circus Dragon, can you really blame everyone from jumping on the challenge? I'm going to hire her for sure to do more art for him in future challenges, so stay tuned for that later on. Alright, I've got another packed episode for you this week. We'll start with our top 5 stories from this week's Paranormal Horror Leaderboard. And then, we'll take a look at every single one of the Narrative Feast stories submitted for that weekly prompt, just like we normally do for the power-up prompts. After that, we'll sit down with poet and author M. Ann Avera for an amazing interview about her inspirations, her approach to character-driven narratives, her work on the Dread Literary Review magazine, and much, much more. So stay tuned for that later in the episode. And that's all I've got for housekeeping this week, so let's dive into our top 5 stories from this week's prompts, right after a short message from today's sponsor. This week's episode of the Saved as Draft podcast is sponsored by Biblical Defenses, LLC, creators of the wildly popular Holy Handgun. Woo! Wake up! I'm here to hunt you! Oh no! A spirit and/or demon has entered my home without my permission. I better grab my gun. Ah! Bullets won't work on me! I'm going to possess you now! Does this sound like you? If so, you need to fortify your supernatural defenses. Introducing the Holy Handgun, the only weapon compatible with any form of holy water, designed to deliver righteous justice at up to 53 feet and with 2,400 psi. Now, Let's see how this scenario plays out when you have the power of God and anime on your side. Oh no, a spirit and/or demon has invaded my home without my permission. Time to show it the business end of the Bible.
Oh no! Is that a holy handgun?
Yeah, you bet your spectral ass it is. Take this, demon!
No! I didn't even know spirits could feel pain. I'll never bother you again.
Keep your home and your family safe from supernatural threats. When spirits and demons show up, introduce them to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Handgun. Order yours today and receive a free Blessed Blaster attachment. Extend your range and power for those really stubborn spirits. All right, and we're back. This week, the first Indulgence challenge focused on paranormal horror. I've run the numbers, and these are the top 5 stories from this week as of Thursday, October 9th, based on a combined score of likes, comments, and restacks. A quick note as well. The leaderboard here is based on stories published between Monday and Thursday. Sunday was our palate cleanser prompt, which is not part of the paranormal set. Of course, any palate cleanser stories do count towards your score for the month, but I'm not doing a leaderboard just for those one Sunday prompts, just so you're aware. And also, keep in mind that Sunday's Week 2 recap will have its own leaderboard showing for the first time the top 10 authors based on total submissions and their complete score. So keep an eye out for that to see who's currently in the lead for the grand prize. All right, let's jump right in. Coming in at first place this week with a score of 41 points, Upon the Crimson Veil by Connor Mancuso. Okay, so Connor has made a big splash since he joined the community recently. He's also been a dedicated participant in the challenge, and it's really paying off because he's number 1 this week. This story was for day 8, which was a prompt about waking up with bite marks and a craving for blood. Now, as I hoped he would, Connor went with a Lovecraftian approach to this. As he says in his post-story section, I've reimagined it through a Lovecraftian lens where blood becomes more than hunger. It becomes cosmic essence, the circulation of the universe itself. And that's absolutely the case here. Connor's style takes epic poetry and cranks that knob all the way up to 11, with beautifully rich imagery and a rhythm that you could set your watch to. It's a unique style, and clearly one that resonates with readers. You'll love to see it. Here's an excerpt so you can see what I mean. The light filled the room. It rose from the ground. A geometry beyond comprehension. A pulse within a pulse. Folding the air like paper. He could feel his heart slowing. Not from death, but from synchronization. Becoming one with the deeper rhythm. The unseen tide. The craving vanished. Only understanding remained. Beautiful work there. Lord Devereaux, your thoughts?
There's a depth of flavor to stories that dare peek behind the thin veil separating our reality from the endless abyss. The author risks life and limb in doing so, but the riches they plunder are often well worth the venture. Connor has tapped into something deeper and more true than many will understand in this piece. As a result, he brings forth flavors that delight and surprise the palate.
Good stuff. And I agree. An excellent start to this week's top 5 stories. In second place this week, with 38 points, is Champoeg Road by Javier Misco, which was for day 6's prompt about ghost hunters. Having read through the comments, I saw this as Javier's first attempt at cosmic horror, which is awesome, honestly. As usual, he jumps right into it like he's been doing this the whole time. What makes this story so good is that it's a slow burn. It opens with some driving, some funny debate on how to pronounce the road from the title, which who knows if I got it right, and then we get to know the subject of the main character's scientific study. I loved how we learned about the backstory of the characters and then why they're there investigating the paranormal before things take that turn. And just when you think you've got it figured out, it turns once more sharply into the realm of cosmic horror. I, of course, will not spoil it here, but I was damn impressed with how this story transitioned from one element and genre to the next as it went on. Here's an excerpt. I was just telling Mrs. Deer how promising our research has been, said Jessica. Josh is a brilliant scientist. He's the best parapsychologist in the country. The wrinkles on Mrs. Deer's forehead deepened.
I can't say I'm a fan of psychologists.
We aren't psychologists, don't worry. It's just a name that's stuck. It comes from the Greek for before the mind. The odor of the spices in the pie was making him queasy. He nudged the plate away and downed the glass of Alka-Seltzer. Jessica's being modest. She wrote the seminal paper on near-death experiences. Jessica took a small bite of pie. This is delicious, Miss Deer. Is that nutmeg I'm tasting?
You have an excellent palate, young lady.
She beamed at Jessica.
Do you cook?
Just ramen, Jessica smiled. So, tell us what's happening. Try to be as detailed as you can so we can set up our equipment properly. And I had to extend that excerpt a little bit because I loved the food references, Javier. I see what you're doing there. I love it. Great stuff. Lord Devereaux, thoughts?
The greatest of tales takes the palate on a journey through realms of flavor. In this piece, we taste the sweetness of comedy, the savory flavor of intrigue, the acidity of the paranormal, and the rich, earthy flavors of the cosmic and unknowable. Each one effortlessly transitions into the next, a story that is equal parts well written and well composed.
Couldn't agree more. Awesome work from Javier this week. In third place, with a score of 38 points, is Sins of the Father by Mina Howell. This story was for the prompt about a priest who meets his match when he crosses paths with a demon that he's encountered before. And that was the prompt, of course. This was also Mina's first story for the challenge, and she absolutely knocked it out of the park, coming in with a really impressive score. I remember when I posted this prompt, she messaged me right away and said, "I have an idea for today's prompt." And honestly, that was the moment I knew that something amazing was coming our way. This piece is super intense from the first line, and it never lets up. It takes us on a wild ride that will keep you guessing all the way to its shocking final moments. Mina's greatest strength as a horror writer is her ability to craft tension and atmosphere, but also pull the reader along at a pace that demands your full attention. Lord Devereaux, what did you think of this one?
I have heard whispers of this Mina author. The offerings for her Ophiocordyceps universe last week were exquisite. But this is what happens when you dine directly from author to table. The words that come straight from the source show me why she is so respected and revered amongst those who craft terrifying tales. Indeed, I could not stop myself from finishing this story once it started. A sign of a delectable dish.
Author to table, that's a good one. I remember that. Nice job from Mina this week. In fourth place, right on Mina's heels with a score of 37 points, is The Mystigian Woods by Mary Ellen Brady. With this story, Mary Ellen takes us back to Starlight Cove, which is a fictional town where many of her stories have been set. It has a rich cast of residents, and it's been the subject of stories in a variety of genres as well. A lot of people geek out about things like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but me, I study Starlight Cove. It's one of my favorite fictional worlds. I love it so much. So with this story, we follow a group of characters heading to the woods near the town, which has been mentioned plenty of times before. Things go awry pretty quick though, but Mary Ellen isn't about to just feed you another ghost story. Oh no. She incorporates elements of time, other possibilities, and terrifying traps that await in the trees. The ending is chilling, and though you may recognize some of the names in the story, remember that Starlight Cove can play tricks on your mind. Not everything is what it seems. Here's an excerpt to get your attention. "Or it's just evening and they're settling down for the night," Ed countered. His voice lacked conviction. His EMF detector had been clicking sporadically since they crossed the tree line. Little bursts of activity with no identifiable source. They made camp in a clearing that felt more like a stage than a shelter. Too perfectly circular. Too conveniently empty with a lone maple tree at the water's edge. Mina couldn't shake the feeling they were being positioned. Arranged like pieces on a chessboard. Love it, love it, love it. Lord Devereaux, what did you think?
Starlight Cove is a place as real to me as the halls that surround my stories. It is an amalgamation of every small town, of every island community, of every place that has soaked up its share of secrets. As a result, a story like this draws flavors that are rich with the umami of lore. It creates a nuanced, engaging, and captivating experience for the palate.
Yeah, well said. I couldn't agree more. In fifth place, with a score of 27 points, it's The Chapel of Echoes by Bent But True. This piece is exceptionally paced. It opens with a superb segment that offers us just the right amount of set dressing before diving into the tale at hand. And as usual with Bent But True's work, what we get here is rich with poetic prose that never feels too flowery. The word choice is intentional, and it serves to enrich the atmosphere, not distract from it. And of course, being that this was for the Ghost Hunter prompt, we get some pretty wild events as the story goes on. It's honestly almost surreal at times, but the tension remains constant all the way through. It's a fascinating story about faith and a cautionary tale about how some doors should remain shut. Here's an excerpt. "We called it St. Aurelia's, though no one had prayed here in decades. The stones still bore scorch marks from the last fire, char curling around the hymn boards like black lace. Greg said every rebuild used the same bricks, as if faith could be recycled. He laughed when he said it. I didn't. Tessa set the microphones near the altar, checking levels, her face pale in the monitor glow. You hear that? She asked. All I heard was wind sliding through the rafters. It's underneath, she whispered. Not echo. Heartbeat. Ty crossed himself and muttered a prayer the camera couldn't catch. Greg told him to stop contaminating the data. When the wind fell silent, the hum returned, thicker now, pressing against my ribs. The red lights on every recorder flared at once, and the crucifix above the door tilted, just slightly, as if bowing to something we couldn't see. Tessa's hand shook on the dial. It's answering, she said. Woo! Really chilling. Lord Devereux, what'd you think?
Bent but true is quickly becoming the kind of storyteller that I would add to my menagerie of greats, but I've been told that kidnapping authors is frowned upon in this modern era. A pity. They would do such great work. There's an expertise to the way every line is crafted that I find captivating. These are more than simply stories. They are experiences, multi-sensory journeys into the depths of the human condition. Delicious.
Haha, and there you have it. Incredible work from everyone this week. It's been another massively successful chapter of the challenge, and I'm once again so grateful for everyone who's participating and sharing your incredible work. It's just amazing to see. Next, we'll take a look at the Narrative Feast stories from this week, which is the prompts that are replacing power-up prompts in October. But first, another short message. Hey there. Today's guest on the show, M. Anna Vera, recently published a poetry collection in partnership with Neon Origami LLC. It's called Complete and Total Honesty. Complete and Total Honesty is a brutal, lyrical, and unflinching exploration of survival, faith, madness, and love. It's a 5-part poetic descent into the American South, mental illness, addiction, womanhood, and the sacred violence of becoming. With haunting clarity and biting vulnerability, M. Anna Vera delivers a collection rooted in confession and reckoning. From the ghosts of church pews and psych wards to the feral tenderness of queer intimacy and familial grief, these poems interrogate the divine and the damned alike. Structured across 5 thematic sections, descent, penance, reckoning, freedom, and postscript, this debut weaves ekphrastic reflections, narrative elegies, and surreal vignettes into a singular voice that is as raw as it is resonant. Featuring poems originally published in Fjord's Review, Eunoia Review, Cathexis Northwest, and more. Perfect for readers of Ocean Vuong, Louise Gluck, and Anne Sexton. If you're a fan of poetry inspired by the author's very own life experiences, you will love every piece contained in this book. And the best part, you can get your own copy for just $10. Check the show notes for a link to purchase your copy of Complete and Total Honesty today. And stay tuned for my interview with M. Anna Vera herself later in the episode. And now, back to the show. And we're back. Narrative Feast prompts are happening every Saturday in October and follow a similar structure to my power-up prompts. They give you an opportunity to answer 3 questions in your story and to write your ideal version of that week's genre. So this week I asked you to tell me your perfect post-apocalyptic horror tale. We had over 10 entries this week, and just like power-up prompt stories, I'll use this space to discuss what makes each story unique. Oh, and don't forget, Narrative Feast stories earn a 1.5 times multiplier on their score. That way you're compensated fairly for the extra time it takes to write one. So let's dive in and see what we got from this week. First this week is Ashen Memories by Hadian Veridicus. This piece has shades of Dune. It feels like a post-apocalypse with deep levels of mystery and intrigue set in a sort of alien world. The world building is exceptional here, and I loved how expansive the scope of the story felt. The author tells stories in a connected grimdark universe, and so it also has shades of something like Warhammer 40k in the best way possible. The world feels very alive and tangible. The ending here with this one was my favorite part, because it wonderfully encapsulated and answered the questions that I had as a reader, and it answered the questions of the prompt as well beautifully. It left me with a devilish grin on my face. Lord Devereux, what'd you think of this one?
I enjoyed this one. A true feast for the senses, with notes of intrigue and mystery. A rich and sumptuous feast of galactic proportions.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Second, this week is Breath of the Clockwork Heart by Leron Haywood. This piece was wildly unique. It's a combination of a narrative feast, and Leron also used a prompt from a site called dailyprompt.com, which is cool. I've never actually heard of that one. The result is a post-apocalyptic tale about a person who tends to a clock day and night with absolute focus. The clock depicts the gods of the realm who we learn early on are dead. I loved how this piece focused on the clock itself and used that to paint broad strokes of world building. It's a really clever combination of elements. The ending here also gives us a glimpse of the future and the outside world. The story answers all three questions beautifully, serving up a 3-course meal for Lord Devereaux himself. Speaking of, what did you think of this one?
Much like the clock itself, this narrative feast was an artistic array of delicious possibilities. A sampling of wonderful concepts, all wrapped in a post-apocalyptic flair. Superb.
Very nice. Third this week is The Bone Choir, The Day the Lies Died. If you enjoyed The Bone Choir from last week's post-apocalyptic leaderboard, this one is a must-read from Bent But True. It builds on the concept of that story, zooming out to show how the apocalypse began and how things evolved. This one's all about world building. It covers an impressive scale of time and narrative space. And as usual with this author's work, it's also incredibly detailed and beautifully written. The concept is super unique, but it's the depth at which it's explored here that makes this one stand out. Lord Devereaux, what'd you think?
The taste of the Bone Choir still lingers on my tongue, so I delighted for a chance to return to this world. The expansion and depth of flavor here is everything I expected from this prolific writer, and more.
All right, and fourth this week is The Warmth Chronicles by Mary Ellen Brady. And let me just say, I love how authors are using narrative feasts this week to expand on the worlds of their other post-apocalyptic stories. This one dives deeper into her world occupied by the Burned Ones, and it gives us a chance to dig our teeth into the lore and the state of everything. As usual, every element of this is excellent, but in particular, I really enjoyed the characters and dialogue here. You can tell a lot about what's going on just by the way people interact with each other and the tone in which they speak. You can taste the suspicion and determination in the words they used. It's spectacular and it adds a lot more depth to this universe. Honestly, I just really want to see this adapted into a TV series at this point. It's so well realized and so unique. I could see it on Hulu or HBO and I'd watch it in a heartbeat. In fact, I'd sign back up with whatever they're charging these days. And Lord Devereaux agrees, don't you?
Indeed, this is a story and world so rich and vibrant that I would love nothing more than to consume it in a visual format in addition to the written one. I would feast upon this universe in all its forms.
Next up this week, we have Deception by Mina Howell. And this is our first poem that doubles as a narrative feast. And I've said it before, but I'll say it again. It's an absolute treat every time Mina decides to publish a new poem. This piece offers a look at the apocalypse through a dark religious lens, showing how the deception of mass belief in something led to untold amounts of death and destruction. It's beautifully written and wildly haunting, and honestly, it has some of the best rhyme structure that I've seen. I'll be honest with you guys, I'll never do a poem this good, but that's why I'm always talking up Mina's poetry and others on here. And here's the thing, I don't normally do quotes here, but I gotta shout out this one stanza here. People called it the Dark Triad, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. I called it vengeance, a poisoning of the host. Like, just check that out, man. Ugh. And this was a narrative feast, served up like sushi. Small bites, handcrafted, but created with such intention and focus that each bite is an explosion of pure narrative flavor. Loved this one. And Lord Devereaux, I'd like to know what you thought.
I must add my perspective here. Mina's poem is dark and horrific, painting a grim vision of the apocalypse that preys upon undying belief and broken promises. The denizens of her world were indeed victims of deception before the reader. The promise of a bountiful feast was indeed kept.
Next up, we have Blood Moon by Norm de Plume. This one took a really interesting approach to the apocalypse. I won't spoil the details here, but let's just say it has to do with wolves and radiation. And it ties pretty well into modern events, too. The standout here is the creativity in both the dialogue and the new threat that this post-apocalyptic world is facing. These are not the wolves we know, that's for damn sure. I love the unique angle here, and the banter was spot on.
I will also add that the flavor of the horror here was truly unique. A combination unlike anything I have tasted, which is truly remarkable, given my well-traveled palate.
Indeed. Next up, we have Abscission by Jennifer Jorgensen. And apparently this is an idea she's had for a while, so the narrative feast prompt here gave her reason to write it. It's times like these that I'm really glad that I do prompts because this story is amazing. The concept is incredibly unique. Essentially, a green fog permeates from within the earth one day, and it sort of mutates and metamorphosizes anyone who comes into contact with it. It's very much like a literal story of the earth taking matters into its own hands, and it's horrifying as a result. We get imagery regarding the transformations, but the way Jennifer layers in world building through exposition and dialogue had me leaning closer and closer to the screen as I was reading. She's just one of those writers that will grab your attention and just never let go. I really, really love this one. Remember to check the show notes for a link to this and all of the narrative feasts this week. Lord Devereaux, what'd you think of this one?
It is truly a different kind of horror when the planet you call home turns its eyes on you and there's nowhere left to run.
I agree with that. Definitely really, really terrifying concept. All right, next up, we've got Optimization by Tina Crossgrove. For this one, Tina took things in a sci-fi horror direction with, of course, the post-apocalyptic setting as well. The imagery in this one really chilled me to the bone. There's a line about electrodes sprouting from someone's scalp like a tangle of silver roots. Honestly, that line put a chill down my whole spine. The sci-fi elements here are woven in really well, too. The cold, calculated dialogue that comes from the character of Eden really added to the atmosphere.
I don't normally welcome the taste of metal on my palate, but when it comes to science fiction, it's a flavor that I expect, combined with the cold embrace of an uncaring machine. A lovely surprise indeed.
All right, and next up we've got In Haven's Shadow by Richard Pack. So Richard is someone I would consider to be a master of world building. If you want to see how it's done, check out his work. This piece had him take the narrative feast prompt and set it in his shipfall world, which is 100% a valid approach. Unlike power-up prompts, narrative feasts don't specify a setting, so use that to your advantage. What I loved about this one is how Richard makes it easy for readers to get immersed in the established setting. It's a combination of medieval and science fiction. And with this story, he adds a dash of horror in the form of the tension that permeates each scene. I love combining genres, as you all know, and so I have to insist you check out what Richard's doing here. You'll learn a ton from this piece alone about how to do organic world building, and you'll discover a brand new universe in the process. Sounds like a win-win to me.
World building provides the depths of flavor that one expects, but it is something much like baking that requires precise measurements. It's always a pleasure to dine on a story that knows exactly how to establish its world.
Indeed. Next up, we've got Fragments Against the Ruins by Jack. This one caught me off guard in the best way possible. It's a sci-fi bend on the post-apocalypse, and it begins with someone waking up from a simulation, but it quickly turns into a sort of existential terror as the main character tries to understand this new world. They begin talking with an android who's been trying to help people transition when they wake up, and this creates an incredibly powerful bond that I wasn't expecting. It's not easy to make a robot feel human, but Jack has indeed done it here. There's a line where the android says, "Nothing is so painful to the human mind as a great and sudden change." You can tell through dialogue alone how much this android character genuinely cares about the people around it. It was honestly really beautiful and very human.
I agree. The addition of a distinctly human android introduced flavors I did not expect, but welcomed them entirely. When it comes to horror, perhaps the fear of our existence being all for nothing is the greatest terror of all.
I hear that. Our next narrative feast this week is The Receipt by No One. This has got to be one of the most wild concepts I've ever seen for a story, but I love how it leans into it. Basically, a receipt starts printing in a supermarket and it doesn't stop. It just keeps spitting out letters and numbers. Before long, it becomes clear it's cataloging history, but not just our history. All possible histories, all at once. Things spiral until it's a global phenomenon, and what I loved most was how the story included screenshots of the receipt and some of the things written on it. It's a really nice immersive touch.
Indeed, it's not something that I experienced often where I sample flavors that are unknown to me. For that reason alone, this feast tantalized all of my storytelling taste buds.
You heard it straight from Lord Devereaux. Next, we've got Life After Ashes by Brenda, A Voice That Wonders. And before I get into this one, I want to say that Brenda recently announced she won't be able to participate in many of the prompts this month due to personal reasons, so I would encourage all of you to check out what she's done thus far, because she does write some excellent horror. And of course, we've all been there before. Sometimes life just demands our attention and doesn't leave time for writing. It happens. Okay, so with Brenda's story here, my favorite part was how she switched from a typical day in the life of the characters to the end of the world in a flash. It happens really fast, but that narrative whiplash adds to the overall atmosphere here. You're left just as confused and scared as the main character. And we do get some answers as they stumble out into the post-apocalyptic world, but the mystery endures. I'd like to see more from this world, so Brenda, if you're listening, I'd like a part 2. Lord Devereaux, thoughts?
There's something truly exquisite about a sudden shift in flavor. One expects stories to follow a specific structure, but it's the surprises that always offer something new.
I hear that. Next, we've got The Remembering of Mara by Vernon Butterfly. And leave it to Vernon Butterfly to make the post-apocalypse sound beautiful and poetic. This piece uses her iconic style to tell the story of the world's fall, but it's done so with the pace and rhythm of a haunting poem. It's not a sudden fall either, more of a steady glide toward oblivion, like a leaf falling from a tree. You know what's coming, but you can't rush the process. And then, once the end comes, we switch to a post-apocalyptic scenario where this sweeping poetry gives us a look at the timeline of the world after the old one has ended. And at the end, a dash of hope to remind us that endings always lead to beginnings. Exquisite work as always from this insanely talented author. You'll love to see it. Lord Devereaux?
I must concur. Verdant Butterfly captures the elegance, beauty, and grace of her namesake with every line and every stanza. Each piece is a ballet of flavor, a dance macabre that blends beauty and horror into a feast for the senses.
Oh, I love that. Next up, we've got Reclamation by Javier Misco. And for this one, Javier is continuing the story of his prior entry that was called Reckoning. As I've said it before, and I'll say it again, I love how authors are using the feast to tell new stories that expand upon the worlds they've established as part of the challenge. With this one, Javier jumps right back into the world he established with his prior story. I really like how this one zooms in to a personal tale about two characters hunting in the rainforest. It gives us a look at how life has changed in the wake of the apocalypse. More than that, it allows us to really get to know the characters and keep the tension high. As usual, Javier's strengths come through in the dialogue and the attention to detail. His description of the location, the rainforest itself, and everything else sounds like it's coming from an expert who spent their entire lives there. He does this with all his worlds, and unless Javier's immoral like the wardens from my horror mythos, the explanation must be that he's just very talented, and that he does a lot of research when it's needed. Lord Devereaux, what are your thoughts?
Javier's stories have quickly become a favorite of mine. Each time I sit down to dine on his work, I know that I'm in store for rich flavors, exquisite detail, and a world that my palate can become lost within. The hallmarks of a truly great writer.
All right. And our final narrative feast this week is When the Black Stars Sang by Connor Mancuso. Connor lives and breathes cosmic horror, and as someone who loves the genre more than anything, it's always a treat to experience his work. And with this feast, he leverages his iconic epic poetry style to show us the end of the universe at a cosmic scale. There's a line where he describes a name carved into the bones of the first dead sun, a name that he refers to as the last light, the ender of eons, and malice incarnate. And that's about as Lovecraftian as it gets. And trust me, I'm here for it. And indeed, as the story goes on, we are treated to an almost unfathomable scope that sweeps across impossible distances and pulls us deeper and deeper into existential dread. If you have even the slightest interest in cosmic horror, you'll be hard-pressed to find anything better than what Connor's been offering as part of this challenge. Lord Devereaux, I'll let you close this one out.
Cosmic horror brings with it flavors of the unknown, of dread, of impossible sights, sounds, and concepts. To assign these things words and to go so far as to frame them with poetry, it's a skill I've rarely seen.
I agree. Well said. And that's it for this first week of Narrative Feasts. I'll be posting Narrative Feast number 2 tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that one. Next up is our featured guest interview, right after a mindful moment. Hey there. This is Chill Bradley, here for this week's Mindful Moment. Here's a quote to consider. Don't bend. Don't water it down. Don't try to make it logical. Don't edit your own soul according to the fashion. Rather, follow your most intense obsessions mercilessly. Franz Kafka. Earlier this week, I talked about this quote at length in my Mindful Monday checkpoint post. It's a powerful reminder that we shouldn't censor or otherwise dampen our light just to write stories that we think will please the masses. Truly impactful writing comes from the soul, and it's created with the author's unique perspective and lived experiences. The things that make your voice your own are the things that will make you successful in the long run. The creative journey is one that never ends. It's a pathway filled with milestones and progress, and there will always be room to grow. And I know that prospect can be defeating. After all, as people, we're wired to win. We need to seize victory, but let me remind you of something. The act of writing and telling your stories is the victory. You've already won. You win every time you hit that publish button. Now it's just a matter of honing your craft and seeking out the people who are waiting to read your stories, because your stories are going to change their lives for the better. Thanks for listening. Back to the show. All right, and we're back. And this week, I'm very excited to welcome to the show an author and poet who has truly made a name for herself in the time she's been here on Substack. I myself have been a fan of her work for a while, so I was really excited for the chance to sit down and talk to her about her creative journey. So without further delay, let's dive into this week's featured guest interview. All right, everyone, and this week on the Saved as Draft podcast, I'm extremely excited to bring to the show here a an author, a poet, and the creator of the Dread Literary Review. Please welcome to the show, M. Ann Avera. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Bradley, I'm glad to be here.
So let's start off by having you tell us just a little bit about yourself and your creative journey thus far.
As of right now, I am a teacher. I teach at a specialized treatment facility. And I am a writer, and I have been a writer for most of my life. It's something that I have always done as a stress relief and an emotional release. And I decided, one of my New Year's resolutions for 2025 was to start sharing my writing with the world. So it's been a cool journey so far.
Very nice. So approximately how long have you been writing? Like, do you recall when, the first time you wrote a story or a poem?
Oh my gosh, I remember it exactly. I was 7 and I wrote a story that had all my best friends in it and it had my dog in it. And looking back, I recall that whole plot was ripped off of a Simpsons episode. So you can kind of guess the media I was shown growing up. I learned from the start, writers should steal. Maybe not blatantly, but I knew it first.
I love that so much. I'm definitely someone who's over the years, put friends and family and stuff as cameos in the stories. I think a lot of writers do that. But The Simpsons was a big thing for me growing up. So that's really funny that you took inspiration from that.
Bradley, it wasn't just inspiration. It was the whole plot.
Do you remember what episode it came from? Just like broadly speaking?
Oh my gosh, it was the one where it had my dog in it, my childhood dog.
Right.
And it was the one where Santa's little helper, I think, is like running away, and they find out that he's been running away to get food from someone else. And so I stole that. I was like, what if my dog did that? And we were like looking for her. And the reason I had a very fat beagle growing up, and I was like, the reason that she is an overweight beagle is because she's getting food from other people.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So seeing as how we're also in the middle of October here, I have to ask, were you also a big fan, I assume, of the Simpsons Halloween specials back in the day?
Those were my introduction to horror in general. Like I remember like getting into middle school age, teenaged, and I was kind of getting more into like scary movies and classics and stuff like that. And I remember like multiple times, like first reading The Shining, being like, oh my gosh, yeah, The Simpsons totally did this. And, different things like The Fly. And it's like, oh yeah, I can recall watching that as a little kid.
That's so great. I have a very similar experience with The Simpsons. I used to love, to this day, I don't know what happened to it, but I had a DVD that I think it had the first, I don't know, it was a collection of Halloween specials from The Simpsons, and it was like my favorite thing in the world back in the day. I don't know what happened to it.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh man, that is awesome. So moving on to my next question here, then you mentioned that as part of your New Year's resolution in 2025 here, you wanted to share your work. So that's actually a great transition to my second question, which is, how long have you been on Substack? And was that New Year's resolution the reason that you decided to make one, or what was the motivation there?
Yeah, so I have been on Substack since around January. That was part of my New Year's resolution, and I actually discovered the website through, there's a project that I really love and I support and I read it every year. It's called Dracula Daily.
Mm-hmm.
And they go through, because Dracula, and I'm going to nerd out for a second, Dracula is an epistolary novel. So they go through, if in the novel a letter was sent on March 4th, they send you that to your email on March 4th. And that was a side tangent, but I had signed up for that and I was like, you know what, I could make a Substack too. And yeah, I'm very glad that I did.
That's amazing. So is the Dracula platform that you just described, is that in and of itself a Substack publication?
Yes, it is a Substack publication. It's like I highly recommend it. They've already started for this year because the timeline of Dracula starts in the spring.
Okay.
But I recommend it for anybody who's interested in reading that classic, but maybe a little bit intimidated by the size, or if you can, like, if you want to keep up with that for as long as it takes to read it. It's really nice just to get like a couple of letters or like a newspaper article and just like be following this action throughout the year. I think it's an amazing way of conveying this horror story, basically.
Yeah, that is incredible. I especially love the attention to detail, like you said, with them lining up the dates of when the letters were sent. That's brilliant. That is really,
Again,
really
I love an epistolary form.
cool. Hmm.
I think it is so, because that was something that you mentioned wanting to talk about, was the disappearance of Dr. Timothy Grand. I started writing that because I felt like the epistolary form, you know, the form of a novel written through letters, written through newspapers, things like that, found documents essentially, is so underused in horror. And I think there's so much you can do with it to convey this kind of like creeping sense of dread.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, since you brought up the disappearance of Dr. Timothy Grand, let's focus on that for a second, because that was, I think, one of the first pieces that I read from you on Substack. And as you said, it's very like kind of an epistolary style, found document stuff like that, which, I mean, anybody who's read my work knows that I love experimenting with structures and kind of, immersive formats like that. Um, so what's the story behind that one? And if I recall, the series is complete, but do you ever intend to come back to that one at all? Because I remember it being like just really rich from a world building perspective.
So honestly, a lot of my fiction work comes from a place of character first, and then I decide what they wanted to do afterwards. So I
Mm.
created this character of Dr. Grand, and I was like, okay, well, I've made you. What do you want to do? Well, you want to go study religion. Well, what about that religion is not what you expect? Kind of like following that plot line. And I don't know, that's a good idea. I might open up that kind of setting again. I think that I had a lot of fun writing it for sure.
Yeah, yeah, that one was fantastic. It was a really good first impression.
I'm glad.
So, with fiction like that, I really like how you said just now that you kind of start with the characters and then let the characters sort of inform the plot based on their motivations and kind of what they kind of want to do. Like you said, I kind of interpret it as like you like listening to the character once they've kind of come to life, if you will. Is that how you approach pretty much all of your fiction?
Pretty much, yeah. I have been kind of taking a break from horror for the past couple months, mostly because I really, I'm the type of person that, like, if I see that I want to improve, say, my specific genre writing, I want to go back to the basics and learn the basics really well. And part of that for me has been developing this process of getting these interesting people in my head and asking them what they want to do and how they're going to interact. And I have heard that writers can be like plot first, characters later, or characters first, plot later. I'm a characters first kind of person.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And if I'm understanding correctly too, it sounds like the characters sort of inform the genre of the story as well. Like you're really just kind of like starting with the character really as a basic concept, as a personality, as a fictional human being, and they're kind of informing every aspect of the story from the sounds of it.
Right. And it's definitely like, there are some people that are built for a sci-fi story, or there's some people, this might just be the way that my brain works. And, but like the people I know, I can kind of think like, oh man, like this person would be a really good character for a sci-fi story, or like this person would kill it in like a cheesy romance,
Mm.
that sort of thing.
That's fascinating. I really like that approach. I guess my next question, just kind of following that line of thinking, is so when you come up with a character, is it something where you're kind of, having this sort of development take place just like in your head, or is it like a process you do where you sort of kind of like take notes? Or I know, like, for example, one time years ago, I was trying to kind of get into the head of some characters for a project I was working on, and so I wrote like fictional interviews just for myself, where I was like interviewing the character and like kind of like imagining what they would say. I'm curious if you have anything similar that you do.
It is a multimedia mess. So I write things down in my journal. I make playlists. I make Pinterest boards.
Interesting. Okay.
I kind of, I try to decide what their favorite book would be, what their kind of like. It's really a fun way to get this holistic idea, because then I have a bunch of playlists that I can listen to while I'm writing. So, highly recommend.
That's amazing. Yeah, it almost sounds to me like the writer's equivalent of like method acting. Like you're really getting into it, right? And immersing yourself into the character. That's phenomenal. I love that approach. It's really, really interesting. Um, it reminds me too. There's a podcast to listen to. There's an author on there named B. Dave Walters. He always says that he knows his characters so well that he knows it, like their entire lifetime, including the day and time that they're going to die or whatever. Even if it doesn't happen in the story, like he knows all of that about the characters. Would you say it's similar with you? Like, do you have that level of understanding of them?
I definitely like to plan out what happens after the narrative that I'm writing. Because it helps knowing, like, for example, I just finished a first draft, very messy first draft of a novel, and it ends off in a bittersweet place. And I had to decide before I even started with this character that would she continue improving? Is this kind of like bittersweet, but there is kind of a darkness ahead? Just really like, I don't know. I feel like if I take care of my characters, they will take care of my story. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that. I love that concept. That's fantastic. So yeah, you mentioned your novel that you just recently completed. What's the kind of general synopsis of that? If you're able to share, I'm curious, like what it's about.
I don't mind sharing. I'll kind of be vague because I'm doing developmental edits,
Sure.
and so much is changing in a good way.
Yeah.
You know how it is.
Yeah.
So I got this picture of a character who her youngest child died in an accident that was due to her negligence. And this woman that I created, who is like really closed off to the world, really like just kind of doesn't trust it from the beginning of her life. It was really interesting to me to kind of explore and parse out how would she deal with this being technically her fault, but it wasn't her, like she didn't do this on purpose. But those kind of like moral in between points are super fun to poke at.
Yeah. I mean, that is a really, heavy premise, but I can see how like, from that sort of like inciting incident, how you could really dive deep into what happens after. That sounds really compelling. Would you classify it as kind of like a drama, or like, I mean, if anything, it feels a little bit like a horror story in the sense like that's a terrible thing to happen, right? But I'm curious, like, just what the overall vibe is.
I would say it's more towards the drama, contemporary kind of literary. I don't like that word.
Yeah.
But it's more of the like contemporary drama kind of fiction. Not necessarily horror elements to it in a supernatural way, but it's definitely more of an exploration of how horrible things can get for a person.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds That's yeah, that sounds heavy, but it's something I would absolutely read. It sounds like it's a very, in-depth story and character kind of
I
focused piece.
swear I am nice to my characters.
I mean, sometimes you do what you got to do, but yes, we try to be nice when we can. So,
Yes.
do you have a working title for it by any chance?
I have been calling it in my head and in my drafts Glass Mother.
Ah, okay.
And I have like debated with multiple people about Glass Mother versus I also wanted to call it Wire Mother.
Hmm.
If you're familiar with that psychology experiment with the rhesus monkeys,
I
um,
don't know if I am.
where one was cared for by a cloth mother that didn't give the baby monkey nutrients,
Hmm.
and there was also a wire mother, like basically a milk machine made out of wire that gave nutrients but didn't have that comfort, and the baby rhesus monkeys preferred the cloth mother even though it didn't give them food.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard of that, but that's an amazing parallel to what's happening with your story. So I can see how that title would work really well. That's interesting.
I get so nerdy about it.
I love hearing the kind of story behind the stories, which is why I really appreciate you sharing some of these details.
Yeah.
So what's the plan for that now that you finished the draft? Are you hoping to self-publish, or are you going to try to pursue traditional publishing with it?
So and I will say this as advice to anybody interested in publishing but intimidated by it. I had a great time working with a small indie publisher.
Okay.
And Neon Origami is out of Tallahassee, Florida, and they're a small business. And for my poetry collection, I loved working with a small press. So I'm hoping I could possibly do that again, maybe with a different press, maybe with the same press. Just because I really liked the experience. It was a really positive experience for me.
That's fantastic. How did you first discover them?
Going through open manuscript reading periods.
Okay.
Asterisk Press or Asterism Press, they have a huge list of independent publishers that are not necessarily like the big New York publishers, but are like small businesses run by a few people. And when I was completing my poetry manuscript, I looked for places that, had open manuscript reading periods, and then looked for places that might be a good fit. And yeah, it was actually a rather positive experience.
I really like that. I've never actually talked to somebody directly who's worked with a small publisher like that, but I could see it being a really good experience. I really love that you have that perspective. Um,
Yes, yeah.
so you mentioned they published a poetry collection. Is this the one that you've been promoting recently, The Complete and Total Honesty, or is it a different one?
It is. It is complete and total honesty. Yeah, so I worked with them to, I had a hand in everything. It was great. I helped edit it and finalize things. And so that was out September 12th.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you what, it feels really good.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, no, I've actually got a copy of it in my hands right now. And yeah, I can see right here, Neon Origami LLC. I hadn't put that together. That's fantastic. So, yeah, let's talk a bit about this poetry collection here because I was really excited when I saw this. Obviously, you do fiction across a bunch of genres, but poetry is another big thing for you. So, how did you get started with poetry? Let's start there.
Um, a similar way that I started with reading,
Hmm.
I read so much of it. I was lucky enough to be gifted books of poetry by my grandmother.
Hmm.
She was an English teacher. Most of the women in my family are teachers, and she gifted me like books of poetry, and I read enough of it that my thinking was, okay, well, now I'm going to try it. And it has definitely developed a lot from then.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I'm looking at the back of the book right now, and I love the way you describe it, by the way, in the summary here. But you refer to it as a brutal, lyrical, and unflinching exploration of survival, faith, madness, and love. So my question is, when did you first get the idea for this collection? Like, when and where did the inspirations come from for the pieces that are in here?
So many of those pieces are about my life and my experience with mental illness and neurodivergency and religion and things like that. And I wasn't necessarily setting out to write a poetry manuscript, but at first I was encouraged by one of my friends to maybe look at doing a chapbook. So a shorter book of poetry, about 30 pages in length.
Hmm.
And I looked through like my back poetry logs and I was like, well, dang, like I could have a full collection. Well, why don't I try doing that? And yeah, it was kind of serendipitous.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I haven't finished it yet, but I love what I've read. Um, I've never actually done a poetry collection of any large extent to myself. So I'm curious, like when you were writing this, was it something where did they kind of come out in the order that we see in the book here, or was it one of those things where it was kind of like you just kind of wrote them as the ideas came to you and then you arranged them accordingly? I've always been curious about how that works.
Oh, I have definitely wrote them as they come.
Okay.
And then I kind of went through a few iterations of, sections and where to place it. And I ended up kind of going thematically with darker themes towards the front and ending towards lighter themes.
Interesting. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. That way you don't like fatigue the reader. You kind of give that balance.
It's definitely a process. And for me, poetry comes way less planned
Yeah.
than fiction. So I think I would have a hard time sitting down and just starting like, well, I'm going to write a poem about this today, because oftentimes my brain wants to do something way different.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Especially as someone who also writes fiction and poetry like yourself. It's like when you're doing fiction, I mean, I'm sure other writers do it differently, but for myself and for a lot of writers that I've spoken to, fiction's a very, linear kind of writing experience where you start at the beginning and you write it to the end. But with poetry, it's like you said, sometimes the idea will just jump in your head, and then if you're doing a collection, you're not necessarily going to come up with one idea after another that fits into a certain theme. Like there's going to kind of need to be that rearrangement at a certain point. And then that's just super interesting to kind of hear from your perspective. Fantastic. So um, something else I wanted to talk about that I mentioned during your intro here is that you also launched earlier this year, if I'm correct, a literary magazine called the Dread Literary Review, which is I was in one of the issues. I know at one point you had accepted a story of mine, which was amazing. That was one of my first times being featured in a magazine of any kind, so that was fantastic. But how is that going? And for anyone who's not familiar with it, kind of what's it all about and how to get started?
So I started the Dread looking for a place for smaller or newer horror writers. And it has just like the feedback and the like folks welcoming us into the Lit Mag community has been great. I brought on a dear friend and co-editor, Lila Farrow, and it's been awesome to have another person because she's got all these great ideas for it, and it has just gone way past what I expected, for sure.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So how many issues have you done now so far?
Oh gosh. I believe I'm at, Lila's probably going to know this and I'm not, 7 or 8, and numerous features in between issues. So,
Right, right, right. And for those who might be interested in submitting, are you always open for submissions? I can't recall.
so as of right now, we are open for submissions. I did take a summer break from accepting submissions, but as of right now, we are completely open. And they can go to the-dread-literary-magazine.ghost.io and find Lila and I's email and send it in. We are generally, it generally takes us about a month or 2 months to respond, but we always respond. And yeah, I encourage anybody who wants to submit.
Excellent. No, that's fantastic. Yeah, and I will be sure to include a link to the Dread Literary Review in the show notes of this episode so that people can check it out and hopefully submit as well. That's fantastic. So, beyond what we've discussed here, do you have any other projects going on this year, either on Substack or elsewhere, that you want to share?
Oh, Bradley, I've got so many projects. One that is coming into fruition. I am fortunate enough to be a Lighthouse Poetry Fellow for this year, and part of that program is writing a manuscript of poetry under the guidance of a mentor. And for that project, I picked one of my recent ADHD hyperfixations, diseases. And you probably, like, all over my Substack is disease poems, and most of those are like outtakes or like things that I'm trying out. But as of right now, I have 39 poems about diseases, and I'm hoping for 30 more.
Wow, that's amazing. So you said you're working with a mentor there, and when it's all said and done, are they going to help you publish it? Is that how it works?
So yeah, they will offer guidance, and I'm actually hoping to try to go to, they're based out of Colorado. They have a literary festival where they invite agents, and like all the poetry fellows get to read, and it has been a super cool experience.
That sounds amazing. So how did you come across an opportunity like that? Because I've never heard of anything quite like that myself.
Scrolling Submittable.
Okay.
And there was like a poetry collective application, and it kind of talked about what it was all about. You know, you work with monthly seminars and meetings with your mentor, and, you know, you get edited by the other members of the cohort. And most of my decisions, especially with writing, come from a place of, well, wouldn't it be cool if I did that? And so I applied, and I feel super fortunate that I get to be a part of it this year.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like the opportunities are out there if you know where to look. And I love that you're just kind of scrolling on the, you know, the Submittable and other platforms and just kind of jumping on opportunities as you see them. I think that's the best way to kind of seize opportunities like that. That's fantastic.
Oh yeah, you got to keep your eye out for stuff like that.
Yeah, no, for sure. So that sounds amazing on its own. Are there any other projects that you've got going on this year? I know you said you got a lot going on.
Two that I'm going to refrain from speaking about because I hold to the superstition that if I talk about it too early, I will scare the ideas away.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So let's see. What advice would you give to other writers that are just starting out on their creative journey, especially if they're just joining Substack? What are some of the lessons that you've learned kind of in your time thus far, you know, sharing your work and kind of putting it out there?
I'll kind of echo what I said earlier, kind of go in with a mindset of experiment, you know, ask yourself the question, well, wouldn't it be fun if I tried that? And it doesn't matter if it's like writing in a different genre or submitting something to a magazine that has like 0.5 acceptance rate, just being like, wouldn't it be fun? Like, this is a cool experiment. I have gotten a lot of growth out of that.
Okay. Yeah, that's fantastic advice. Yeah, I also absolutely love experimenting. So yes, very, very good advice. All right, well, that is all the questions that I had for you today. But thank you so much for coming on the show here. This was a fantastic interview, and I really loved diving deeper into some of your work. It's you know, as someone who's been reading your stuff for a while now, it's always amazing to be able to have a conversation with the artist behind the art.
Well, I appreciate being able to be here.
All right, thank you. And a big thank you again to M. Anna Vera for coming onto the show. That was a fantastic interview. Honestly, I could have probably just talked to her about The Simpsons for the entire time, but that's neither here nor there. All right, let's talk about next week on Substack. So tomorrow, we'll bring our second narrative feast where I'll guide you towards writing your own paranormal horror magnum opus with 3 distinct questions to serve up in your story. Sunday, we'll offer our palate cleanser prompt from the prompt goddess herself as a way for us all to reset. And then Monday begins week 3 of the challenge. We're doing psychological horror for week 3, so get ready to make your readers' heads spin. And that's all I've got for this week. But thank you again for being here, for sharing your stories with me, for taking these prompts and running with them. It takes hours and hours of work to organize a challenge like this, but I swear it's worth every single second when I see amazing people like yourselves creating even more amazing stories and sharing them with the world. At the end of the day, it's what it's all about. This community means everything to me, and I appreciate every single one of you for being here. So here's to another productive week of delectable horror. Stay safe, stay hydrated, and I wish you the best with your writing. This is Bradley Ramsey, signing off. Lord Devereaux, I really think you should take a break. You're eating a lot of stories.
I can stop whenever I wish.
Somehow I doubt that.